December 10th, 2008. New York City is shivering under the weight of a financial apocalypse. Inside a luxury penthouse on Manhattan, Bernie Madoff, the man they called the Pillar of Wall Street, pours himself a stiff drink. His hands are steady. He calls his sons, Mark and Andrew, into his study. They are expecting a talk about bonuses, but Bernie says 3 words that would shatter their world forever. It's all a lie. He wasn't admitting to a bad quarter. He was confessing that his multi-billion-dollar empire was nothing but a ghost. That their father was the most prolific con artist in human history. $65 billion. Let that sink in. To spend that much money, you'd have to burn $100,000 every single day for over 1,700 years. But behind the numbers were real faces. Steven Spielberg, Kevin Bacon, Nobel laureates, and thousands of ordinary people, teachers, doctors, retirees, who trusted Uncle Bernie with their life savings. How did a former chairman of the NASDAQ deceive the entire world for 3 decades? Today, we go inside the Lipstick Building to see the secret life of the 17th floor. This isn't just about greed. It's about how the world falls for a perfect smile. To understand the monster, you have to understand the man. Bernie Madoff wasn't always a villain. He was a kid from Queens who watched his father's dreams get crushed by the IRS. That trauma created a hunger that could never be satisfied. In 1960, he wasn't a banker. He was a lifeguard at Silver Point Beach. He saved every penny from his paycheck, exactly $5,000. Just $5,000. He used that money to start Madoff Securities. His first office? It was so small he had to share a telephone line with his father-in-law. But Bernie had a secret weapon: technology. Back then, Wall Street was a boys' club. They traded stocks by yelling at each other on the floor. It was slow. It was messy. Bernie saw an opening. He started building a computerized system to trade stocks instantly. This is the irony. Bernie Madoff actually was a genius. He was one of the 4 main architects of the NASDAQ exchange. He modernized the entire world of finance. By the 1980s, his firm was so successful that they were processing nearly 10% of all trades on the New York Stock Exchange. He became a king, a visionary, a man whose reputation was so bulletproof that no one bothered to look at his books. But while his legitimate business was making millions, a darker machine was starting to turn. Behind the legitimate trading desks, he began inviting a select group of friends into a private investment pool. He promised them 10 to 12% returns every single year, no matter what. It started small, a few friends, a few country club members, but soon the entire world wanted in. And that's when the legend of Bernie became the lie of the century. If you visited Madoff's office in the Lipstick Building, you'd see a masterpiece of corporate theater. The 18th and 19th floors were beautiful. White marble, glass walls, young Ivy League graduates shouting into phones. It was the show. But then there was the 17th floor. This was the heart of the darkness. You couldn't just take the elevator there. It required a separate security card. And if you did get in, you'd feel like you stepped back in time. There were no modern computers. There were no internet connections. Instead, it was filled with old IBM AS/400 servers and dot matrix printers that screeched all day long. The people working there? They weren't math geniuses. They were high school graduates who didn't know a call option from a put option. Their leader was Frank D. Pascali, a man who once described himself as just a kid from Jersey. Their job was creative writing. Every single day, Bernie would look at the market prices from the previous day. He would find a stock that went up, and then he'd tell his staff to print a trade confirmation saying they had bought it at the bottom. Imagine the scale. They were faking millions of trades. They had to forge the signatures of auditors. They had to create fake bank statements. They even had a fridge where they kept documents to make them look old and yellowed before sending them to regulators. It was a manual labor of lies. For 30 years, Bernie didn't buy a single share of stock for his investment clients. Not one. Every time a new client gave him money, he simply deposited it into account 703 at JP Morgan Chase. He used that money to pay off the old clients who wanted to withdraw. It was a $65 billion shell game. And the most terrifying part? He did it all with a paper trail that anyone with a calculator should have been able to expose. Every great villain has a nemesis. For Bernie Madoff, that man was Harry Markopolos. But Harry wasn't a detective or an FBI agent. He was a quant. A math nerd who spent his days staring at spreadsheets and probability curves. In 1999, Harry's boss gave him a simple task. Bernie Madoff is delivering 12% returns every year, like clockwork. Find out how he does it so we can copy him. Harry sat down with the charts. He stared at the screen for 4 hours. And then his blood ran cold. The math simply didn't exist in this universe. In finance, there is a fundamental law, the risk-reward ratio. If you want high returns, you take high risks. Your line on the graph should look like a jagged mountain range. But Madoff's line? It was a perfect, smooth, 45-degree angle upward. It never went down. Not when the tech bubble burst, not even after the chaos of 9/11. Markopolos famously said, "Madoff's returns are like a baseball player hitting a home run every single time he's at bat for 10 years. It's not talent. It's a scam." Harry didn't stay silent. He sent a massive 19-page report to the SEC. The title was a warning shot. The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud. He proved that for Bernie's strategy to be real, he would have to buy more options on the Chicago board than actually existed. But the SEC did nothing. They were starstruck. To the regulators, Bernie was a king. He was the man who helped build the very market they were supposed to watch. When Harry showed them the proof, they treated him like a conspiracy theorist. They'd go to Bernie's office, share a joke, drink his expensive espresso, and leave with a clean report. For 9 long years, Harry Markopolos lived in a state of pure paranoia. He started checking his car for bombs every single morning. He carried a concealed weapon everywhere, even in his own home. He was convinced that a man protecting $60 billion would have no problem hiring a hitman. It was a 9-year race between a man who knew the truth and a system that was too arrogant to listen. Harry was the only one screaming in a room full of people who had their ears plugged with Bernie's gold. The end didn't come from a brilliant investigation. It came from the world falling apart. 2008. The global economy is in a death spiral. Markets are bleeding red. Suddenly, everyone, banks, charities, celebrities, needs their cash. They start knocking on Bernie's door on the 19th floor. "We need our $7 billion, Bernie. We need it now." But the vault was a graveyard. Bernie had already spent it all. On December 10th, the pressure finally became too much. He sat in his luxury penthouse, looking at his wife Ruth and his sons. The mask he had worn for 40 years didn't just crack, it shattered. He confessed. He told Mark and Andrew that the entire empire was one big lie. He expected them to protect him, to help him hide the truth for just a little longer. He was wrong. His sons realized that every second they stayed silent, they became accomplices. They walked out of that apartment, went straight to their lawyers, and by the next morning, the FBI was at the door. Imagine that morning, December 11th, 6 a.m. Agent Cacciopi enters the bedroom. Bernie is standing there in his pajamas. He looks fragile. He looks like a ghost. The agent asks, "Is there a legal explanation for this?" Bernie looks at him with dead eyes and says, "There is no innocent explanation." The news hit like a nuclear strike. People who thought they were billionaires woke up to find they were bankrupt. It wasn't just rich celebrities. It was the Madoff 123 victims, pensioners who lost their homes, charities that had to stop feeding children in Africa. Bernie hadn't just stolen money, he had stolen the future of thousands of families. The pillar of Wall Street was finally revealed for what he truly was, a parasite that had fed on the world's trust until there was nothing left but bone. Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years. The judge wanted to ensure he would never see the sun as a free man again. But the legal system was the least of his problems. The Madoff name became a radioactive curse. His son Mark was the first to break. For 2 years, he was hunted by the media, sued by victims, and haunted by the fact that his own father had used his name to legitimize a fraud. On the second anniversary of his father's arrest, Mark took a dog leash, went into his living room, and ended his life while his toddler slept in the next room. Bernie begged the prison to let him attend the funeral. They said no. His second son, Andrew, was consumed by a different fire. His cancer, which had been in remission, returned with a vengeance. He blamed his father for the stress that was killing him. Before he passed away in 2014, he told the world, "I will never forgive him." Bernie's wife, Ruth, was stripped of everything: the jewelry, the mansions, the dignity. She ended up living in a small condo in Connecticut, far from the Manhattan elite who now spit at the mention of her name. Bernie Madoff died in a cold prison hospital in North Carolina in 2021. He was 82 years old. No family members came to claim his body. He died as he lived for 30 years, surrounded by lies, but finally forced to face the truth, alone. This is the final lesson. The most dangerous predators don't hide in the dark. They sit next to you at dinner. They promise you safety while they dig your grave. The next time someone offers you a guaranteed path to wealth, remember Harry Markopolos. Remember the 17th floor. And never forget that in the end, the math always, always wins.